Good evening, everyone. Tonight is a meeting of the South Kingstown Planning Board. The date is Thursday, October 16th, 2025. The time is now 6:42 due to a delay by a meeting prior to this meeting. Our first agenda item is roll call. Susan Axelrod.
Here.
Liz Karp. Here. Joe Murphy. Here. Robin Pothier is absent. Caper Wilson.
Here.
Armand Monaco is absent, and Maria Mack is here. Our next agenda item is a public hearing, minor land development preliminary plan, Safe Harbor Marina, Silver Spring, proposing to demolish and reconstruct an existing maintenance building with associated site improvements. Is there anyone representing the applicant?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Attorney Matthew Landry on behalf of the petitioner, Safe Harbor Marina. You may recall the petitioner and I came before you, I think in May or June of this year, on a pre-application. We presented the project to you. Nothing has really changed materially from that pre-application meeting. It did go to TRC. We received a few comments, and there was a supplemental plan set submitted by Principi Engineering. That included a sheet titled Site Utilization Plan. There were some comments from staff and I believe from TRC, as well as this board during the pre-app, that a sheet was necessary to show the overall boat storage aspect of this and what was planned for the site as a whole. There was nothing on file since this has been a long existing use on the property. So that sheet was supplemented and should be in your packet. There were also some additional technical details and notations on the sheet plans, but generally the site design and overall layout has remained unchanged from when you originally saw this back in May or June. In terms of the proposal, you're all familiar with the Safe Harbor project along Spring Street. There's an existing maintenance building that is really dilapidated and in disrepair. It doesn't have heat. The marina operation does a lot of outboard maintenance work for the marina clients. That's a big part of their business, and they need a larger, more modern facility to provide those services to its clients and its customers. This is a substantial upgrade from what exists on the property. The remaining aspects of the property are not being changed. The existing marina operation is going to stay intact. The boat storage aspects, the areas of boat storage, none of that is changing, and it's not subject to this application. There is an existing retail trade building on the property that has already been modified. That's not subject to this application. And really the focus of this is a benign expansion of the existing maintenance facility so they can work throughout the winter hours. It's heated, it's got air conditioning, upgraded bathrooms. It's really modernizing the building and aesthetically much more pleasing for the area. There is some additional impervious pavement that is being installed. That's due partly because of the gravel driveway and materials getting inside the workshop with the new building. You know, the road debris and the rocks and the gravel can cause issues. It's also a fire and safety concern. The impervious pavement will be an improvement to the site conditions. The OWTS system is being replaced as well and upgraded, so that's certainly welcome news for the old system that exists on site. There is an application pending with DEM. I don't believe they have approved that yet. I can ask Seth to comment on that, but we did submit to DEM. This has previously been before CRMC for various maintenance ascents. This will go to CRMC, and any approval would be subject to their ultimate assent of this project, as well as DEM's approval of the septic system, but we don't anticipate any issues or concerns. There was some initial discussion with CRMC staff, as well as a site visit, a pre-application meeting, if you will, with staff, and again, there's been no indication there would be any issues obtaining approval from that agency. As of about a few hours ago, I did receive a letter from Mr. Pastore, who's a neighbor immediately to the south of this property. Mr. Pastore has been very much familiar with these proceedings and has had notice of this project for the last several months. Prior to this submission that you have before you, Safe Harbor had proposed a 15,000 square foot building to contain this exact use, much larger building that was located to the south of this parcel near those residential homes. As a concession to the neighbors and being sensitive to their concerns, that project was scrapped in favor of a much more modest, smaller building in the existing location as far north as possible away from the residences. It wasn't until today that I received a letter asking for some buffering and screening with respect to his property. You know, I leave it to the board to listen to those comments. I don't want to speak for Mr. Pastor. But again, I would just say that this is an existing commercial marina operation that's a by right use, the marina operation. You know, Mr. Pastor had acquired his property knowing very well that there's boat storage on the property. He only purchased his property within the last couple of years. The boat storage aspect of this is not being modified or changed in any way. The existing boat storage locations on site are staying as they are. We've clearly identified those on a site utilization plan at the request of staff. But again, the boat storage aspect of this is really not subject to this application. It's really just the building itself. And my clients have done everything in their power to move this as far away as possible. And certainly won't impede or impair anything regarding the neighbors' properties. Again, the boat storage is an existing condition, has been there for many, many years. So with that, we have the full team here. I do have 2 supplemental exhibits I sent to planning staff today. It's really just an aerial of the site. There's 4 pages, but it superimposed the proposed building on it. It gives you a good perspective for where the building is and the aerial views from the existing conditions. And I also have a sheet set of the elevations and conceptuals of the building. I believe I handed those out to you at the last meeting and they're in your package, but I do have additional photographs. They're unchanged from last time, but again, just for everyone's perspective, I do have those and those may be helpful for the board's review. So with your permission, Ms. Chair, if I could hand those out.
Certainly.
Thank you. So again, I don't know if you need to mark them, but the first exhibit that I handed out, Jay has those up on the screen now. They're aerial views of the existing conditions of the property with the proposed building superimposed, so you can get a sense of what the building will look like once it's constructed. The second package is one that I handed out, I think, at the pre-application hearing, and should be in your packet, but it's just a couple of sheets of what the building design will ultimately be. Everything will be dark sky compliant. The lights on timers or sensors, so everything will be well controlled. And there's really no significant exterior lighting or impacts from the building itself. But again, I have the whole team here. I would just ask Seth to comment briefly on any updates on permits and the engineering aspects of the plans. And then I have Chris Fagan, the architect, to speak to any questions the board may have on the design. And I've got Beck and Alex from Safe Harbor Marina to talk about the operations if the board has any questions. Seth, do you mind just commenting on the engineering aspects?
Good evening. Seth Lemoyne from Principe Engineering. One update is we do have the permit application approved from RIDEM for the septic system. And that's welcome news. And beyond that, we're ready. We're prepared to submit to CRMC upon town approvals when and if that occurs. I'm welcome to answer any other questions you may have regarding the site design and stormwater controls.
Questions from board members?
I have one.
Susan?
Hi. Could I ask you to explain the bioretention basin and whether that will be planted with any plant material, wetland species, or if that's just going to be paved with riprap, like what your plan is for that?
No, this is a proprietary system. It's called a rain garden. It's a proprietary by Ferguson, and its name is a focal point. So it's a planted, vegetated, shallow retention system with filters beneath it. So what you'll see on the surface is a 1-foot deep shallow depression with full of plantings.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Other questions relative to the site plan or engineering? Joe?
Is there any external storage of any type of fuels or hydrocarbons?
Not that I'm aware of, but I can defer to Chris on that. I don't believe so, no.
So any fuels, I mean, you must have some fuels on site, they're gonna be kept in the building, or? You don't have a hazardous material locker outside, or?
Alex is the general manager of the Safe Harbor site, so he can speak to that. Alex? Just state your name for the record.
My name's Alex O'Coin. I'm the general manager of the property. What we have on site for waste fuels is a 20-foot shipping container for a third containment, and then within the container itself, there is a secondary containment underneath each vessel. We have a waste oil or recycled oil. We also have a waste fuel. All those are.
That's in the building, or?
No,
is
that's
that-
external. That's external currently, and it will remain external.
And is it a tank, or what is it?
There are 55-gallon drums for waste fuel. There is a 250 or 275-gallon recycled oil.
Is there overhead, or is there a secondary, some type of containment around that?
It's inside of a shipping container, and then there's also drip containers underneath them as well.
Okay, and then how about fuel? You must have some
Heating fuel?
Either diesel fuel, gasoline, whatever it is that you need to test and run motors?
Yep, currently that's all stored within that shipping container. So it's a watertight container. It's actually triple contained.
Okay, and then back to the engineer, maybe if he could just explain just give us a brief overview of the drainage system, and specifically how you address the first flush in the parking lot.
Sure, yes. So that drainage system is going to manage the water quality volume and water quality or recharge volume for the first flush, the first 1 inch of rain from the rooftop of the proposed building. So it's going to go into a proprietary system we were mentioning. It's a small footprint system, able to adequately manage those flows, and that's that bio. Correct. The first
Joe.
inch on the roof.
How about in the parking lot? Is there any best management practice for the first flush
No,
on
we
the
didn't.
parking lot?
We didn't feel that was required. Really, we're not increasing impervious while we're adding some asphalt to it. What's out there now is a very compact gravel that is more or less impervious out there, and it's, went out and we checked that prior to performing our design. So it's a very limited amount of asphalt going down. We're not paving that whole parking lot. It's just a strip that's going to go down from the apron entryway and extend in front of the new building only, and that's it.
I mean, gravel is fairly impervious. I mean, what we've seen on other projects, what we requested sometimes on other projects, is some type of small rain garden or some other best management practice, so that the first flush, even on gravel, if there's any leakage of oil from any of the vehicles, that it would have some minimal amount of treatment. And we have seen that and required that in the past in just plain parking areas.
Okay.
It's subject to a lot of, vehicle flow.
Yeah, our design does conform to DEM, but, obviously not to what you're requesting. We feel that this is an improvement because it's going to be limiting the amount of erosion that may be going into the waters with the asphalt versus that compact gravel. It's a very dense gravel that's out there, particularly in front of the existing building because of the travel lift that's in heavier equipment that is accessing that building.
Okay, thank you.
Can you just show us where the shipping container is located? Is it on the northern portion of the site? Is it that?
I'll defer to Alex on that.
Okay.
The shipping container is currently on the eastern side of the building, that small little container there on the northeastern corner of the existing building. It's a 20-foot shipping container.
Madam Chair, it's shown on sheet 2 of the civil design plans, existing conditions. to the northeast corner of the existing building. Between the building and the
Nope,
ramp.
farther up to the northeast. A little more east.
CJ.
Directly south of that small deck there, and directly left of, yep, the site container, or steel container. That's where all of our waste accumulation center is.
And that location is planned to be permanent?
Yes, that's going to stay there.
I think it's sheet 1 of 2. Sheet 1 of 2. I think so. I don't know.
Other questions?
I have one more.
Susan?
So thank you for explaining your stormwater system to me. Is there somewhere on one of these plans that it shows that you're planting this as a rain garden design? It does, I can't see on the plans where that's indicated.
It is not, we do refer to the proprietary system that was designed by others, and I do have just a single sheet of that up, which I'm happy to pass around.
Like, is that part of the packet that we've been given?
That was not part of the packet that you were given, no.
Okay. I feel like
That was
it
independent from that.
should be part of this packet, just for part of the permanent record, that we have information on that proprietary system that you're planning to use on site.
Okay.
I feel like that should be part of this package.
Okay, I'll include that.
Thank you.
Interesting that somebody got some kind of a trademark and called it rain garden.
That's not the term for it. They call this a focal point, and they call it a high-performance modular bioretention system, to be complex about it, but more or less it's a rain garden.
Right.
So furthering that, it would be good to know what's being planted, how that's being done, sort of how that system works.
Yes,
Would be useful for us.
okay.
Thank you.
Yes, because is that a generic for anywhere, or is it specific to our zone and growing conditions and so on? Which I would think it would be.
Yeah, it's specific, the plantings are specific to this zone.
Great. Anything else from board members?
I just want to go back to the shipping container, so, so you talked about the shipping container, you talked about it having triple containment. What is the maximum volume that you maintain that triple containment?
There's two 55-gallon drums for waste gasoline, and there is a 250-gallon oil recycling for regular.
My question is more relative to the containment and design of the containment than what's actually you have there. What I'm trying to get at is what is the maximum that you could have inside that trailer before that containment, before it overflows. And I can tell you where I'm going with this is that I'm going to ask that there be a condition of approval as far as the maximum amount that you can store, knowing that that amount still stays within the containment, and also that the size be found to be a significant part of this plan, so that if you have to change that, you'd have to get approval from the administrative officer. But what I'm trying to get at is the containment with the shipping container that you have, and you have containment, what is the max that can be inside that shipping container before you would violate that containment? And typically, I think on the containment, you'd probably need at least 110% of the volume that's stored, if I'm correct.
I don't have the exact number ready for you. I can look into that and get back to you.
Okay. That'll be good, yeah.
But we have a total of 350 gallons total max capacity before we have to call for pickup.
All right, so I just want to make sure that the containment is good for 110% of that.
Okay.
And then also, I'm hoping that the board will consider a condition that you don't exceed that in the future unless you came back. So you may want to look at not how much you're planning right now, because then you may be locked into that, more of what is the volume that you can get within that container and still have the effective triple containment and still have 110% containment. Okay? Thanks.
Are they engineering?
Maybe.
Go ahead.
So I think I'd like to ask another engineering question. I brought this up when you were here at pre-application. With this volume of glass and the location of this, have you engineered some sort of system to prevent or reduce bird strikes against all of these plate glass windows? I brought this up at pre-app.
I do recall that.
Because we had just seen it at the high school where they are putting in some kind of groovy technology that prevents birds from smashing into the windows. Do you remember that conversation? And has there been anything incorporated into that to hopefully reduce bird strikes because you're sitting on the water in a big plate glass window?
I do recall that conversation, but I will defer to Chris Fagan, the architect, as he was involved in that.
Yeah, Chris Fagan, just state your name.
Chris Fagan. Nice to see you again. So, yes, the windows and doors package are going to have avient deterrents, which is a glazing system that basically allows the birds to see the glass more, and it prevents them from flying into it. Also, I think that the doors that we end up speccing, we're probably going to have less glass on that front elevation they're currently shown. So as we're getting into conversations with different door manufacturers, it's probably going to be a door that's going to have less glazing.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, if I may, just to back up to the question about the spill prevention, there are particular regulations in a spill prevention plan that Safe Harbor Marina has to adhere to. Beck Bennett, I'm going to just ask him to comment briefly on it. I think it would benefit the board just to understand how that works and what that plan is.
Hi, Beck Bennett. I'm VP of Construction and Development for Safe Harbor Marinas. So I started out at the property level at Newport Shipyard and in EHS, and I was responsible for handling a lot of all the various chemicals and petroleum-based products that we would produce. What we typically have, what we always have at properties is what's called an SPCC, a Spill Prevention Control and Countermeasure Plan. So that's all dictated, the containment and level of containment, volume you can keep on site, when you have to pump those things is all clearly defined, and we have records of those. Whenever we call a company like, let's say, for example, Western Oil comes down and takes a lot of those products, it's very closely regulated on what is going in and what is going out of the property and how that's controlled and contained. And then with the SPCC, that is dictating how you go about handling spills, when you have to report a spill, who it's reported to. So each property has those plans in place, and we also have an individual in the seat that we can certainly provide literature to you, on those processes, because it is very important to us.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
But I probably would feel more confident if, and nothing against staff here.
Sure.
But if the person that was operating that knew what the maximum amount was, that they knew what the maximum amount that container was.
Yeah, it's dependent on volume, on what the property produces. So let's say when you hit 1,000 gallons, then you're required to have X amount of level of containment and capacities. So that's how it's dictated, for us to, how it's regulated for us. You're asking specifically what he holds on site, I think, is the concern?
Well, so we're reviewing a plan, right? And we want to make sure that that plan is, one, well thought out, and that it's safe, and you're going through all the environmental concerns.
Sure.
Part of that plan is that you have hazardous materials on site, hazardous materials that are very close to the water.
Right.
You have containment, and we are going to approve a plan with that containment
Yes.
design. I personally would like to see that our condition of approval is that if you increase that, especially if you significantly increase that, that it's something that comes back in front of the town.
Sure.
For review. So I would like to see, and I'm not sure how the other board members feel, that when we approve this, we do a condition of approval, which is limiting, well, either accepting your existing trailer size, but if it gets any larger or the containment and your storage capacity gets larger, that you come back here. So I was trying to get at not necessarily what you were planning on having, because you could possibly have more as long as the containment. But understanding what the maximum is for containment, still having that 110% or whatever, and then putting a condition of approval that if you need to exceed that in the future, that you come back either in front of the board or in front of the administrative officer to get approval to increase the amount of hazardous material that's being stored next to the water. That's all.
Yep.
So that's why I'm trying to get at what size is it, and what's the maximum that you could have with what you're proposing.
That would be something I'd have to defer to the property based off what they would expect the volume. Since the number of boats isn't increasing at the property, that volume would typically stay consistent with what it currently is.
Madam Chair, since I understand the question Mr. Murphy's asking, but we legal here. And again, I think it's a regulatory question or whether it's a planning board issue, DEM, CMRC. But from my perspective, and I can ask legal this question, they have an existing operation and an existing maintenance facility, an existing storage container, a safety plan in place, a storage of fuel in place. If they don't choose to build this building and they continue to operate as a maintenance plan and they want to add a 55-gallon drum inside that storage container, I'm not aware of any permitting process where they would have to come back to the planning board. They're an existing operation regulated by other entities. I'm not clear in their approval process that they're proposing to change any of their liquid or we'll say petroleum type fuels other than the way they manage them today, which are regulated by others. So I understand what Mr. Murphy is saying, but I think the planning board and council's here and they can absolutely correct me if I misspeak, that tomorrow if they added a 55-gallon drum to that building, they're required to have the containment redundancy within that structure. They're required to have the manufacturing labeling of that product.
Right to know.
They're required to have the spill kit capabilities on site and materials handling on site. I'm not sure that the construction or expansion of the building affects material storage or the regulatory realm for which that occurs.
But I wasn't getting at whether they could add a 55.
But you want to limit them, Joe.
55.
You specifically said you want to limit their storage capacity of petroleum products in that container.
I want to know what size container they have. So if they had proposed, let's say, we're going to put a trailer, well, we have a storage container that could take 2,500 gallons. And they decide that they want to put a storage container in there that could take 20,000 gallons. Would that be something that comes in front of the board? Or would that be something that would come in front of the town? Or could they increase that storage container by a factor of 4 or a factor of 10 and not come in front?
I think, we'll use it, if they had a 30-foot storage container right now, if they wanted to swap it out for a 40-foot, that's accessory use to the existing facility, and I'm not sure that would be regulated by planning and potentially regulated by another state agency.
So would it be helpful if you were to provide us with the SPCC that you plan, criteria that you referenced, and a follow-up to Joe's question, because I understand what he's talking about in terms of capacity and is there a threshold? What kind of, obviously there's oversight from some regulatory agencies, DEM,
Yes.
CRMC. Do they all communicate with one another and with the town? Just asking.
That I can't speak to, how the state agencies talk with each other.
Well, I guess before we dive into that, I'd ask the applicant's legal counsel to give us their position on if they were to increase their capacity at any point, whether they would agree to come back to the planning board, or if they take the position where they would not want to come back.
Or what's the process if they,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, so I guess as a threshold matter, we're not changing any of the existing fuel storage with this application. The existing container there, is on the plans, but it's really not changing or expanding or being modified in any way. It's really just the building itself. I think most of these issues are regulated by another state agency, but we certainly would have no problem submitting or supplementing our submission with, the plans or the permits or any of the information that's relevant as to capacity. Whether or not we would have to come back, is a question of if we are proposing to change the volume size, is it within the town's jurisdiction or not? I think there are other state agencies that would take the position that they're in charge of dealing with fuel storage and those things. But if it's a site condition that's being expanded, the footprint's being expanded, or it modifies anything on the site plans that could potentially, implicate existing approvals, if this were to be approved. I don't want to say that we wouldn't come back. It's hard to speculate what would trigger that, whether it's the expansion of the container itself or the volume. I think if it's just the volume itself, it's probably regulated by another agency and not the town. But if it's a footprint change or structural change or something related to the use itself, it would be more of a town issue. But we could certainly provide any of the specs, the volume, the plan, and potentially even have to update, I'd say a condition that we have to update the town if there's any changes in that plan. Maybe it would be an easy way to address those concerns and ensure that the town is provided notice of, any changes to that plan. Because I don't know if, what I get from Beck is that, that volume is probably consistent, but I also don't want to stop you if it affects the business because you may not know what the volume is at certain times.
The volumes typically, obviously, it's, not speaking.
Just restate your name so we
Sorry,
know who's
this is
saying.
Beck Bennett, and I'm not speaking, this is more of a general statement, not specific, just about this is industry-wide. It is going to fluctuate with the season, right? Depending on, for example, at a previous property, that volume might increase over the summertime when you have a lot of boaters coming in, transient boaters coming in who are doing maintenance, a lot of overhaul work for they're going off to another port. So you're doing all your general maintenance, that's oil changes, things of that nature, and you're producing a lot. The wintertime, it may drop off because all those boats have left, and that volume drops off at other properties substantially. So you could be holding a lot of volume on the property, and typically you're on a schedule with a company like a Western Oil where you're saying, hey, I want you here every Tuesday pumping out, any type of byproduct that we're producing. And that's typically how that works. There's a manifest then that's generated. I believe one of the other members mentioned every barrel is labeled so you know what's in it. They won't take it unless they know what's in it. There's a manifest generated that goes into our logs. There's the SPCC that, and I understand your concern, it's very valid, right? If there's a flood event and you have this container, what happens with that material? So typically, in that type of event, when you're planning for something like that, you're going to be calling Western Oil saying, I want all this material out of here. Everything's going to get pumped out. We're going to move this away from the water. There's those countermeasures in place. So I think that's, what we're trying to address. But the volumes are regulated very heavily as to once you hit a certain threshold of what you're producing, then it gets to more stringent criteria of what's going on. And I would say this is probably what they would call a low volume property.
And Madam Chair, I just want to put on the record, I agree with their council's analysis of the division of jurisdiction. I don't think an increase in the volume alone would trigger further review. You'd really have to look for structural changes that would fall under the town's regulations to bring it back before the board. But that being said, if they're willing to have a condition that updates the town for changes of capacity that may not trigger further review, if they're willing to agree with it, then that could be a condition.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, you could also consider a condition that just says that at no point in time shall the waste facility exceed the design requirements, exceed the capacity that was designed for.
Yeah, that's acceptable, certainly.
Or the requirements of the hazardous waste regulations, which is where all this is regulated.
And Alex is informing, we're below tier 2 for reporting. I don't have a lot of context around that, but it's
I don't think we
volume-based.
can hear you.
No, sorry. That's a volume-based, again, everything's volume-based, certain the tiers and criteria, so we're below tier 2. I don't know the volume off the top of my head, but, you know, the provision Mr. Parker mentioned, I think is reasonable.
Okay. Do you have other members of your team who,
Not at this time, unless there's operational questions, design questions. I would just reserve any response to butter comments, but at this time, I don't think there's anything else to add unless there's any specific questions. I'm happy to answer them.
sure. Other questions, comments? Susan?
Did he just say he was going to talk about the abutters comments?
Yes.
Sorry, did you just state that you were going to talk about the abutters comments?
No, they haven't had an opportunity to speak, so
Right.
I would just reserve an opportunity to respond to any comments that come up, and, you know, we can address those at that
We
time.
would ask you anyway, so
I know.
it's all good. Anything? No? No further, if there are no further questions from board members or comments from staff, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? Please come up to the mic and state your name for the record.
It's red, that means it's on.
Yes.
Hello, Joe Pastor. I live at 380 Pond Street, just to the south. If you go down in that picture, you may, oh, I'm off the screen there. But as was stated before, this is a little bit last minute, so I do apologize for that. I got the notice that this was going before you guys last week. I reached out to Alex by email. I didn't hear back, which is no fault of his own, I'm sure. But that's kind of what drove me to send you guys a letter and come up here today. Have you received the letter that I sent out by email? I have copies here if anybody would like to see that now.
We don't have them, so we'd be happy to get a copy.
Madam Chair, just for clarity, staff did not provide it because the abutter stated he would be in attendance and would have copies for the planning board. We received them at a late hour this afternoon.
The first thing I'd like to say is these are my neighbors, and obviously maintaining a good relationship with them is the most important thing here. I've known Alex for a long time. I have a great relationship with the people that work there. They're all wonderful. We keep our boat at the marina. They're good stewards of the property. I know that they're before you guys or everybody, to get approval of this plan. And because they're developing the site, I was hoping you'd take the opportunity to come a little bit more into conformance with the zoning ordinances that state that there should be screening between the zones. And that's more or less the only point, obviously. I don't want to get too much into it because, like I said, this isn't a he said, she said kind of situation. It's more of just, I think I'd like to take the opportunity to say, if we can add some screening, that would be great. I believe it would beautify the area a little bit.
Give them a minute to read the article.
Oh, sorry. Please take your time. Read my letter.
Do you have an estimate on how many trees would be required for the area that you're proposing them to be planted?
I do not know off the top of my head. I imagine, my driveway is about 200 feet long, so I imagine they have, if that was that whole entire property line, I imagine they've got about 200 feet of property line there to cover. So if they were 10 feet apart, that's 20 trees.
And I certainly understand your concern with regard to deciduous vegetation versus conifers. Have you looked at the area of the existing deciduous trees and where the root zone is, and if there would actually be space to plant additional species? Because I'm assuming you're not talking about cutting these down and replacing them, right?
No, there's actually, that picture from my deck, that's looking out over the wetland buffer, which then hits their parking lot. So the wetland buffer stops just about where, if you drew a line directly north from my house, the wetland buffer for my property stops just pretty much where that property line starts. So if they started there and moved towards the northwest on that property line, they obviously have to not alter whatever wetland buffer is there and then do what they can with the space that they have. So if there was screening that was being required to put in, I imagine it would be in the parking lot area that is just up against shrubs and whatnot that are in my yard.
So and we are always about screening, if you've been to any of our meetings. However, it is an existing as-of-right use. It has been in place for quite some time. Jamie, Jay, we don't have any requirements. It would have to be up to an agreement and the goodwill of the applicant,
Yeah.
correct?
Madam Chair, again, Jamie Rabbit, Planning Director. If you look at the photo that Mr. Parker has put up on the screen right now, that's an existing condition. The applicant, in the review of the material that was submitted, are making no proposed changes other than to the site, except for changes to the northern portion of this property, which is over 230 feet from the southerly property line. So if you look at this aerial photo, you'll see the main drive aisle coming into the site. Everything that is above the ground is occurring to the top of that road, or the north, again, which is over 230 feet away from the property line. The property owner, in the correspondence received by us, noted that they purchased the property in 2019. They are aware that they moved next to a boat storage facility and marina, and the storage of the boats has been occurring much before the purchase of the property by the abutter before you today. With regards to regulations, if this was a new facility, you could absolutely incorporate either the mandatory 50-foot buffer between incompatible uses, or if it was a reduction of that 50 feet, it could be supplemented with fence and additional landscaping and a more dense border. I think it would be hard-pressed for the planning board to mandate that a landscape buffer be installed on an existing, we'll call it non-compliant with regards to the buffer, but that buffer came into place after the marina was in existence. The only thing the abutter could do is work with the landowner and see if the landowner would willingly, of their own volition, install any type of landscaping or buffer. But I don't see a regulatory way for the planning board to acquiesce to the request by the abutter.
It's a little hard to see. Do you have vegetation on your lot? Any kind of, it's a little hard to see. It looks like it's probably deciduous in nature as well.
If you can zoom into that, yes, this is
It's
a
all
loosely
deciduous.
wooded area here.
Yep.
Of mostly beech trees, oak trees, some birch trees.
So it looks as though there's limited space as well to add additional plantings in that area. But as Jamie said, it would really be up to a conversation that you would want to have with the applicant. We cannot, it's
No,
not a new...
I'm not asking you to do anything that is outside of the rights of
And
you to
just so
do.
you know, you'd want to make sure, Obviously, the oaks and the birches are surviving well, but make sure it's something that can survive adjacent to wind and water and so on. Did you have any other comments?
I personally do not. I think my father would like to speak with you for
Certainly.
a moment, if allowed.
Hi.
Dick Pastor, I'm a PE, I own RP Engineering, so I have a question for the planner. Do you generally move towards conformance to zoning? With, let's say, undersized lots commonly owned that are contiguous, you would merge them because you're moving towards the goals of the zoning ordinance, correct?
So that is not apples for apples question.
Just
So
a question
I-
is,
I
it's just
will-
a question is if, do you move
My
towards?
perspective is not germane to the topic, so I'm going to choose not to answer that. A goal of any planning and zoning commission, planning board, zoning commission, is always to seek compliance. But a landowner who has an existing right to operate a business can also not be imposed by regulations that aren't required for them to adhere to. The regulations state, in essence, if this was a new business going in,
I understand.
that is required. This is an existing building that has been there prior to the abutter, prior, I don't have the date whether it's prior to the construction of that home, but we can't impose a regulation under an existing condition that in essence is non-conforming as it relates to that buffer requirement.
So it's
That's why I stated it is only of the volition of the owner of the existing marina. In essence, we'll use a term, a planning terminology, out of the kindness of their heart to install any type of buffer, but it's non-regulatory on behalf of the planning board.
So it's pre-existing non-conforming, correct? The lack of a buffer.
The regulations under this permitting process do not require the applicant
That was
to
not my
install-
question.
That's how I'm answering your question.
My question is
This
it pre-existing
applicant-
non-conforming?
This applicant is not required to install any landscape buffer associated with this permitting process.
I understand that, but it is pre-existing non-conforming, correct?
I'm not under oath.
Is that
I don't
right,
have to
Counsel?
respond.
Peter? Yes.
It's pre-existing non-conforming. Okay. So, I mean, as the Planning Commission, and I was on one for 18 years, as the Planning Commission has done, they've asked numerous questions about things that are not specific to the development. Now, we're not here to try to create problems. Joseph keeps his boat there. Alex is a friend of ours. I know that. But as you look out from the house, and he bought the house well knowing that the marina was there. I was a chairman of a planning commission for 10 years in North Kingstown. I understand the arguments. However, there is room to put trees, and we've offered to allow them, if they want to put trees in there, to put them along the property line so it overgrows onto his property so they don't lose storage, because they are tight. They need this room to store their boats. We understand that. They're increasing the building a little bit. That may cut down on their storage. This is not an effort to try to diminish or cripple the applicant by any means. However, his house is about 20 feet above those boats, and when all those trees, those deciduous trees, are leafless, you're looking out over a field of shrink wrap. So that's why we're asking the Planning Commission to consider requiring, if you choose to do it, some trees that we've specified that are spectacular when they grow, and the deer don't eat them, and they grow quickly, and they make a beautiful buffer. And I'm not going to beat a dead horse, so, all right.
Thank you. Sometimes the deer don't eat them. We understand where you're coming from, and again, it's a conversation that hopefully can occur between you and the applicant.
Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? If there are no further comments, would someone like to make a motion to close the public hearing? So moved. Motion from Joe to close the public hearing. Do we have a second? Second from Liz. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. 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 Motion carries.
Madam Chair, you do have a staff report on this application with a motion and recommended
Yes.
conditions. Hearing some of the discussion tonight, and I can work on this wording, but I would make one proposed revision,
Okay?
and that would be that the storage of petroleum and/or other types of potentially hazardous material included but not limited to fuel, oil, lubricants, coolants, etc., shall be stored in an all-weather building or buildings and/or storage containers designed for such storage and shall contain the appropriate spill provisions with adequate storage in the case of a spill.
That's good language, Jamie. I believe that Mr. Landry had agreed to language somewhat relating to if the footprint or structural changes occur, that the applicant would update Town of South Kingstown and come back to the planning board. Is that correct?
Yes, I think, I understood he committed to that, but the difficulty on the regulatory side is it a quart, a gallon? You know, what triggers the next aspect? I think if
Well,
they had a...
footprint
If they
is-
had a...
Yeah, it's the footprint.
So again, they have a storage container of X. If they propose, if there was a 30-foot storage container there now, and they propose to do a 40-foot, that's not on the site plan and would require at least an
Right.
administrative
Right.
approval. That's general zoning principles.
Nevertheless, I think the board would feel comfortable, as would, I believe, Mr. Landry, with adding that language to the motion.
So, again,
Unless you have better language.
So we agree, so the storage of these chemicals is regulated by volume, not structural footprint. I think the point I was trying to make is that, you know, there's other agencies that deal with volume and spill and things of that nature that wouldn't necessarily trigger local review. But there are certain aspects of the design, if the building changes, if the footprint changes, I think we would automatically have to come to planning for any of those structural changes. We are certainly amenable to a condition as to, you know, complying with spill prevention plans and, you know, any regulatory concerns as to overflow, you know, prevention and things of that nature. But the structural footprint, it's the volume that really governs, you know, the fuel storage and not necessarily the footprint. But to the extent a structural change requires town approval, we would have to come anyway.
I'm adding language, hang on.
And then, Jamie, if you could also reread the first section that you added.
Yep. Okay, I'll just read it back to you. The storage of petroleum and other types of potential hazardous material included but not limited to fuel, oil, lubricants, coolants, etc., shall be stored in an all-weather building, parentheses, buildings, and/or storage containers designed for such storage and shall contain appropriate spill provisions with adequate storage in the case of a spill. Any change, additional sentence, any changes to the size of the existing storage buildings and/or storage units will require application to and approval by the administrative officer in consultation with DPS.
Everybody good with that?
Yeah, there would be changes to the size and/or any changes to the size of the existing one and/or any existing, any new structures.
Yes. Yep.
So we would add that as condition number 6.
Correct.
Anything else?
Jamie, there was a comment by Susan, I believe, early on about the rain garden. Were we lacking some detail about the construction requirements for that rain garden?
It was that proprietary rain garden, I believe.
There is a reference to it, I think, in their plan sheet 6 of 7. We would just make sure during final that detail's added. If I look at that real quick, just bear with me. I believe... Okay, there's a reference for C-site drainage calculations for for the stormwater treatment systems details. That is part of the package and would be reviewed during final. So there's, the site plan refers to the storm drainage calculations that they were submitted that are part of the application process. So there is a reference to it on sheet 7 of 7.
I don't really understand the sheets, because I've got like 3 of 9, then I've got 1 of 3, and then I've got 2 of 4. Like, I don't have them.
If I can look at papers.
They're not numbered in any sequential way here.
Would it be easier just to say applicant shall submit criteria for this proprietary rain garden, whatever that, the correct name was, to the planning department? Okay. Everybody good with that? So that would be either added to 6 or number 7, whatever people are happiest with. If there's nothing else, would someone like to make the amended motion, which begins on page 3?
I'll make that motion. The South Kingstown Planning Board hereby grants preliminary plan approval for SHM Silver Spring minor land development application proposing to demolish and reconstruct an existing maintenance building with associated site improvements on Assessors Plat 63-3, Lot 60, located at 362 Pond Street, SHM Silver Spring LLC, applicant owner. This approval is based on the submitted plan set, preliminary plan submission for Safe Harbor Marinas LLC land development project, Assessors Plat 63-3, Lot 60, 362 Pond Street in South Kingstown, Rhode Island, including sheets 1 through 6, dated July 22nd, 2025, completed by Persim Company, Inc., 27 Seconic Ridge Drive, Tiverton, Rhode Island, 02878. Findings of fact 1 through 5, conditions of approval 1 through 7, with 6 being the language as discussed tonight relative to the storage of hazardous materials, and 7 being the drainage discussion.
We have a motion from Joe. Do we have a second? Second from Caper. Any further discussion?
I have a question about that. So in the motion, it refers to sheets 1 through 6, or whatever it is, but the plans that I'm looking at, that I think are the newest plans, are not numbered in any kind of sequential way, and does that matter? Like, this is, it goes from 4 of 9 to 1 of 3 to 8 of 9. Like, do we need to have it some kind of...
So, Madam Chair, if your motion just clarified the reference to plan sheets 1 through 6 in the project memo to be the plan set received as of 10/16/2025, and we'll make sure one of the hard copies are in the file.
Okay, and actually, it says dated July 22nd, but the updated plans are dated September 19th.
Correct.
So we should change that?
Just reference that, yes.
Anything else? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Hope you folks have a conversation with the neighbors. We always encourage communication.
I appreciate your time, and they will certainly have a conversation and try to find an amenable solution. Thank you.
Our next agenda item is a public hearing, major subdivision, combined conceptual master and preliminary plan, Saugatucket Farms. Is there anyone representing the applicant?
My name is Dan DeCesaris. I'm a registered professional civil engineer and project manager at Joe Casali Engineering, offices at 300 Post Road, Warwick, Rhode Island. So yeah, I have a brief PowerPoint that I'd like to go through just to give you some background on the project.
Certainly.
The site is located to the south and west of Tower Hill Road and Saugatucket Road, identified as AP 42 Lot 8. It's about 14 acres in area, and it is located entirely in the town's R40 zone. The site is bifurcated by the Indian Run Brook and associated wetland area. That wetland area is afforded a 75-foot buffer zone and a 100-foot jurisdictional area. That wetland edge was verified by DEM in September of 2024. The applicant's proposing to proceed with the flexible frontage provisions of your town's zoning ordinance, and as part of that process, we need to provide a yield plan showing a conventional subdivision. So as part of the submission package, we've included a plan which depicts a 5-lot subdivision with a 340-foot public roadway, cul-de-sac. All the lots have adequate frontage and area. However, as noted, to blend in with the natural character of the area, the applicant's proposing to proceed with this flexible frontage option. The proposal also includes 5 lots. The lots will be accessed by a 330-foot long by 20-foot wide crushed stone access road or a shared driveway. In addition, we've included a crushed stone or a grass paved hammerhead turnaround for fire apparatus and delivery vehicles. The application also includes on parcel 5, there is an existing dwelling. This dwelling was constructed in 1880. It is in pretty tough shape, and the applicant is proposing to rehabilitate that. That process has started currently. He has received all necessary building permits to do so. So the rehabilitation of that dwelling consists of demolition of a portion of it and construction of an additional 2-story addition, about 1,243 square feet. As part of this application, the driveway access from Saugatucket to that dwelling will be closed, and a new driveway will be provided to that lot from the shared access road. On the remaining 4 lots, we're proposing 2-story, about 1,500 square foot, 3-bedroom, single-family homes. All will be provided access, again, from that shared access road via 12-foot wide paved driveways. With respect to utilities, there is a 12-inch water main within Saugatucket. There is a fire hydrant directly across from proposed Lot 1 for fire protection of the proposed development. We're proposing a shared 2-inch domestic water main, which would require a heated enclosure at the property line, and then individual 1-inch domestic services to each of the proposed dwellings. With respect to sewer, there is no sewer in the area, so each lot will be provided with a new septic. As noted, Lot 5 already has an approved septic system, and the 4 remaining lots will have new septic systems. We do have approved soil evaluations from DEM back from October 2024. With respect to electric, there is electric available in Saugatucket. We're likely going to need another pole on our side of the road to get electric service over. From there, everything into the development will be underground. With respect to drainage, the topography of the lot, everything is pitched from Saugatucket towards the south, towards the wetland areas. So for the shared access road and the private driveways, we're proposing a sediment forebay and sand filter basin. And then each individual lot will include several rain gardens for treatment of rooftop areas. So with respect to the permitting process, as noted, we have an edge verification and improved soil evals from DEM. We were before this board in December of 2024 for a pre-application review of the flexible frontage option. We have submitted to Union Fire District and have received approval from them. We've also submitted to Veolia and have received approval from Veolia for the water. We did submit to DM Wetlands in June of this year. We haven't received any approval yet, but hopefully will be forthcoming soon. And as you know, we're here tonight for a combined master preliminary plan approval with waivers for the flexible frontage. And we're, next step in the process, if we're successful tonight, would be final plan, ideally with the administrative officer. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Just an initial question. So it sounds as though you have resolved 2 out of the 7 requests for waivers, is that correct?
Yes, we do have the water approval and the Union Fire approval. Yep.
Questions, board members?
Could we just clarify?
Turn your mic on, please.
I would appreciate your clarifying which of the requested waivers we should eliminate from our consideration at this point.
I believe the water and fire, correct?
Correct.
Madam Chair, you could just do 1 or 2 things. Again, we prepared the draft motion with the 7 waivers, with the understanding that the applicant has ticked off 2 of them. I want to say to simplify and maybe not overcomplicate. If you're okay with the waivers, they still have 5 of the 7 to tick off. Knowing they already ticked off 2, we would just do that during final.
And on the memo, it should be, I believe, major subdivision. It says minor on the staff comments.
Okay. And Madam Chair, I do have a revised motion. We did receive some comments from Mark Convoy.
Yes, we
engineering.
just received them this evening, and
So we had a little bit of time, so I was able to amend the motion to include those items in the draft motion for your review and consideration. I'll hand that out, and we're available to review them.
Sure, yeah. Once we hear if there are further questions from board members, and perhaps, Mark, you can also explain to us the viability of the concerns from DPS and how soon those should be addressed. Thanks.
So, Madam Chair, if it's okay, I can go through the changes. In the draft that was provided to the planning board prior to tonight's meeting, you had 5 conditions. Number 5, beginning with survey monumentation. Item number 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 are a result of Mr. Convoy's comments. I want to say none of them are potentially affect your ability to take action on the application and can easily be done during final plan review. Item number 6 is, again, there's a waiver request for final permitting from DEM. We're just clarifying that the planning board is requiring all of their permits, both from RIDOT and DEM, to be in place prior to final approval. Item number 7, water service pipes shall not cross intervening properties. Again, that's a revision on the location of how water's coming into the site. And again, that can be done between the applicant's design engineer, the town's engineer, as well as Veolia. And there's just, it's review and resurrection of how they cross easements coming into the site. It's not a engineering aspect, it's primarily a easement and access issue. Item number 8 is the proposed 2-inch water main should be reviewed and approved by Veolia. Again, there's the potential for the letter in there. There's a waiver request. We can double check that under final plan review. Item number 9 is the proposed stormwater management area located on parcels 2 and 3 shall be included within the drainage easement. Revisions to the plan shall be reviewed and approved by the administrative officer in consultation with the town engineer. That's just an expansion of their proposed easement to include additional area. Item number 10, the proposed 12-inch driveway culvert located at the intersection of Saugatucket Road shall be resized to include runoff from Saugatucket Road, and based on a 25-year storm event, revisions to the plan shall be reviewed and approved by the administrative officer in consultation with the town engineer. Potentially that 12-inch pipe will need to be upsized to a 15, potentially worst case an 18. Item number 11, stormwater facility maintenance agreement shall be finalized and recorded prior to construction. Typically that's done prior to final plan approval. Item 12 is the CERC permit required from Department of Public Service for soil and erosion control. And item 11 is the physical alteration permit, which they're required to get from the Rhode Island DOT. Those are all kind of post-planning board action items. So from our perspective, town road.
So, are you finished? I want to have Mark just go through these and explain which of these items shouldn't necessarily wait until just before final, what your priorities are in terms of the time frame for these things. And thank you, Jamie, for incorporating those into the motion.
Yeah, I would think the first comment that I'd written on there, which was the water service pipes shall not cross intervening properties. What you have there is the water, you have a shared water main going along parcel number, the property of parcel number 3. And then you have services crossing other properties there. That's something that we don't allow within our ordinance, our water utility ordinance, or even the sewer ordinance as well. They have to, those services and lines have to either be within a road or private road, or individual services have to be on each lot. So the choice is yours, whichever way you want to go about that. And the other items that were on the list are pretty simple to conform to. I don't think you'd have any problem conforming to any others. So that's it.
Thank you. Comments, questions from board members?
So it's a 5-lot subdivision with the existing house remaining, and then 4 new lots?
Correct.
And Joe, they're proposing an addition to the existing house.
If I look at the soil evaluation map, the property outline here, and I look at that house along Saugatucket Road, it looks like it's almost in the middle of that property, or the width of that property, slightly to the, maybe slightly to the west, but close to the center. But when I look at your drawing, proposed conditions, watershed map 101, that house looks considerably further to the left. If this map is correct, it appears that one of the new lots, which would be directly across from that, would be pretty tight up against that property line, which is not the way it's shown on this map. You follow me? So you got that existing house, which on this drawing looks towards the center, and then you got the road that's proposed that's quite a bit over. It doesn't look like these two maps are. I'm looking at this one, Maria, here.
Joe.
Yep. And
And then on this one here. So if you look at this, this is kind of close to the center, slightly to the left. Then if you look at it here, it's quite a bit over to the left. You got the road quite a bit over this way. If this map is correct, that would not leave much land. So those two maps do not seem to line up.
are these from different sources? Is one of them the NRCS soils map, which is what I looked at first, but it's not what?
Yeah, so the map that you're referencing was from our wetlands subconsultant. I don't know how he develops his maps, but I believe he just obtains aerials and estimates property lines from GIS. The site plans are based off of a Class 1 boundary survey and are substantially more accurate than that figure is depicting.
Okay. All right, so I'll take that for your word there, and I'll take it as not an issue. In order to get the variance for the flexible frontage, I believe the requirement is that you have to show it's a better design or better land use. To me, one of the nice things about Saugatucket Road is that it's single-family houses on single-family lots. It's a fairly well-traveled road, but you don't actually hit a subdivision, I think, until the Watson Farm, which is quite a bit away. And then we're proposing a subdivision here, which is fine, you're certainly within the rights to do that. But to me, what would make it a little bit better is making this entrance very subtle and maybe having a little vegetation along the street or along that road such that you don't see all the houses, such that we keep the character of Saugatucket Road of basically just seeing single houses on single lots versus a subdivision. So I don't know if there's something that you can propose or work on as far as vegetation and make this whole 5 lots more subtle.
So one of the things, and I didn't bring it up in my initial presentation, we did include a landscape plan with the submission, sheet L1. We crafted the entry into the subdivision to reuse existing stone walls that are being taken out throughout the site. So that entrance is going to be lined with stone walls on either side, mimicking the existing stone walls on the site. And there's also significant landscaping proposed in front of those stone walls.
Which,
Do we have a copy of that landscape plan?
that's on the big drawings.
It's towards the end of the site plan set.
Third to last page.
While everyone is looking at that, one of the things that I did pick up on, I believe it was waiver number 7, that has to do with view shed analysis. That's one of those things you probably shouldn't ask for a waiver on, because it has so much to do with the integrity of the site and the outcome, and exactly what Joe was making reference to.
Peter Abernathy. I am the owner of the property, builder, developer, I guess. In regards to what Mr. Murphy mentioned regarding the viewing of the subdivision from Saugatucket Road, the landscape plan developed, really incorporates some good idea, some great things on the drive lane in. Some notes that are on here that I actually had wanted to address were clear and grub vegetation along the existing stone wall, that I don't want to do that. In regards to Mr. Murphy's, comment that the existing vegetation, the stone wall, as much as we can preserve the old growth, the way the wall looks, all of that, outside of the entranceway, I would move to keep that as is, so that way it retains the appearance of its original driveway into a single-family property.
What is along that wall now?
I can't give you that. It's growth. I don't know. I mean, I'm not opposed to, doing some new mixing and matching and, thickening it, but I was very against clearing it, to be honest with you. So.
Well, there certainly are members on this board much more knowledgeable about landscaping than me, so I'll leave that part to them.
But just appreciated your comment about keeping it grown in.
Susan?
So I have a bunch of questions, but right now, since we're on the wall out front, I guess I'll stick to that first. So right now, the wall is buried in foxgrape and, I don't know, bittersweet and all kinds of stuff out there. You're not planning to clear away that wall and restore the, right now that you can't see the wall's buried. Are you planning to leave it that way? Which will then, in turn, buffer the view into your site, or are you planning to clear the wall away?
So our plan is to only clear the wall. The existing driveway is kind of, there's a below CR, if you look at the landscape plan, CR8 number 2, oh, there's the driveway. The new driveway is going to move eastward about where his cursor is. So that area will obviously need to be cleared to allow us to open the stone wall up, et cetera. And, assorted activities in that general vicinity. But there's, I don't know offhand the exact amount of frontage we have there, but there's obviously an exorbitant amount each way that I don't intend to touch in any capacity. Unless, it's a requirement, but I like the buffered, grown-in look. That field has always looked that way. The field, I want it to maintain that same image from Saugatucket Road within reason.
I appreciate that sentiment. My question is, first off, I don't know from looking at this this street view how far in, is that tree line to the left, the tree line that's on the map? Like, are those, for example, are those trees that I'm seeing on the left side of that screen being left there, or is that being cleared? And part of your landscape plan has you planting trees between the stone wall and Saugatucket Road, which I think is the public right-of-way, and I don't know about the town having you guys planting trees in that stretch.
Yeah, during the TRC, we discussed shifting those trees into the property. So those trees that are shown on the right-of-way are going to be shifted into the property.
Okay, so your intention would be to leave that sort of gully area,
Yes.
the stone wall wild and woolly, and then plant trees inside?
Correct. The only place we're taking out vegetation in the stone wall is where the new driveway's going in.
Yep.
And we're effectively going to take that wall and shift it to where the current driveway opening is. We're closing that one off.
And then it looks like you're taking a stone wall from interior on the site and reusing those stones on that front wall as well as an entrance.
Correct.
So I think you just made a statement that this is going to be a public road?
No. No.
In your opening statement, you mentioned.
Yeah, under the yield plan.
Oh, I see.
We showed a public road. This is
Okay.
going to be private.
But it will be
road
gravel?
gravel road, correct.
Does it need to be 20 feet wide? It seems awfully wide for a driveway, private road.
20-foot width is the minimum requirement per NFPA for fire protection access. We could, I can confer with the fire marshal and see if he'll entertain a reduction in that width.
I think we would entertain that reduction, which also would then potentially tighten up the entrance a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So is your entrance now, like, do you have some vision of, the wall sweeping in, or is this more like the old school Saugatucket Road break in the wall with a farm in there? Like how formal will you build? What's your intent for that vision of that entrance?
I think the intent over time is to have it look the way that roadway looks now. We want it to ultimately blend in with the character of the area. I don't envision a tall stone wall with a sign on it that says Saugatucket Farms. That's not what anybody wants.
You're right. Okay.
So, we can, my concern is that, if we tighten up that road too much, a fire truck can't swing in there.
Yes.
In the event of an emergency. So I just want to confer with the fire marshal and ensure that he's okay with a narrowing of that opening.
But for a private road with 5 houses, 20 feet might be a little more than you need. But I appreciate the gravel, because that is in keeping with that community,
Mm-hmm.
that neighborhood.
Susan, if I can add, generally, the fire department generally requires 20 feet. There are times where it might warrant a slight reduction where they do a reinforcement on the sides of it so that it's not an issue, but generally, I believe it is 20 feet for the fire department. And the fire department obviously the fire chief was part of the TRC review that reviewed this project, who did not weigh in on that part of it. So I would caution that if there was a reduction, I guess a condition that could be considered would be to consider, to work with the fire chief to reduce it to the least as possible if appropriate.
Madam Chair, to add on Mr. Parker's comment, National Fire Protection does require the 20 feet. In discussions with the fire marshal, he has been open to 18 feet with 2-foot load-bearing shoulders. So there is an opportunity to reduce it by 2 feet, but the traveled width for load-bearing, in essence, he'd do 2 feet on both sides of it, so that if the firefighting vehicle goes off the edge of the traveled way, they don't disappear in the mud. Basically, it's load-bearing with just a 2-inch surface of loam. So they may sink 2 inches, but they're not going to rot any more than 2 inches. So.
And that seems like a reasonable suggestion. We, for a long time now, have not necessarily made, especially for these smaller subdivisions that are similar almost to a residential compound, not design them for fire trucks and everything else that,
Madam Chair, if I can just clarify a couple of things with regards to Ms. Axelrod's questions. The plans do note that vegetation is being removed along the frontage, minus any trees greater than 2-inch caliper. You have to balance safety with regards to sight line and not just safe stopping distance. So there's a significant amount of invasive vegetation along that stone wall between multiflora rows, invasive grapes, as well as other varieties of invasive species. You don't have anything in your regulations requiring landscape buffers for subdivisions along frontages, so the applicant has done their best to potentially remove some of that vegetation for safety issues, but replace it with some street trees. They are shown in the right-of-way. I'm just assuming that working with DPS will just push them 10 feet east, south onto the property. And then I think the planning board needs to understand East of the driveway, there's, we'll just call it 75 to 100 feet of regrading associated with the roadside swale and that proposed culvert. And then on the west side of the proposed driveway, there's some grading associated with the right roadside swale for approximately 150 to 200 feet. So between the edge of road and the stone wall, there is grading that is going to require vegetation removal up until that stone wall, both east and west of the proposed driveway cut. The majority of that will also improve sightline for safety to vehicles exiting and entering, as well as vehicles approaching east and west to any car waiting to exit or enter. So again, it's a balance between public safety, the subdivision regulations, and then an attempt to revegetate some of that area.
So Jamie, who will be doing that grading?
The applicant will have to do
applicant.
that at their expense. They would be required as part of their PAP for the curb cut to also incorporate that, as they've shown on their engineered plans, that grading. So if you look at the plans up on the screen right now, you'll see the proposed curb cut, as well as you move downward by CR, I think it's CR82, you'll see that stone wall. There's grading along the road, past that stone wall, past AR AG82, and then begins at the, Jay, if you can scroll down a little bit more. You'll see the TC21. Just above that, there's another tree proposed. That's where the grading starts for the roadside swale. So almost in front of the existing house, all the way to the entrance for roadside grading necessary for stormwater drainage. And then there's a northern portion that's being regraded to AG8, which is the second proposed street tree along Saugatucket Road.
So just a couple of thoughts on that for the applicant. In order to best utilize your effort and minimize expenses, if you are doing grading along those stone walls and you have invasives growing in and around those stone walls, somebody really needs to know what they're doing when they go in and do that. Otherwise, you could end up degrading the stone wall while trying to clear it and do the grading. So you have a landscape architect who has done the plan, and I believe that at least as far as plantings are concerned, one of the notes is that there should be a horticultural professional involved in the planting, but that should also, yeah, it's number 5, relate to the grading and the stone wall, because you don't want to have them tumbling down, somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. The other thing is that if the street trees are going to be essentially internal to the site at this point, you should look very carefully at where the best locations for those are. And again, I would suggest that you use your landscape architect, because you probably have root systems from the vegetation and the invasives that have been there for a long time that can be somewhat aggressive. So there might be, it might be necessary to prune some of that to prevent the trees from being impacted, and also the location of the trees. So that'll be important for you guys to consider as you do that. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is that when you gave the description of what you wanted to do as far as the entrance, after Joe's question, that's exactly the kind of narrative you want to supply in your application, because that helps us and helps you as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I've got. Joe? Nothing?
No, I've got that one.
Susan?
Sorry, so now I'm thinking about grading out front. So if you are grading that whole area, it won't be possible for you to keep much of that vegetation. And so if you do grade up to the stone wall, and the stone wall is either in worse shape than you hope, or it gets damaged, do we need some sort of assurance that that stone wall will be restacked in such a way as, if the stone wall suddenly becomes a prominent feature of the front of your property, we'd like to see it not hit with a backhoe and then tumbled out to the side of the road. Like, I think there needs to be something about making sure that stone wall stays. But also, if you grade it, I don't know if you're planning to plant some stuff in there, but in that sort of full sun, hot area, disturbed ground is a perfect place for knotweed to start getting established. Like, you might be opening up a different sort of can of worms with your invasives by churning that up a little bit and then letting the knotweed blow in, and then that's a different kind of screen that I don't think you want to have out there. So I don't know if we need to add some sort of landscaping out there, or at least some plan in place to make sure you don't end up with, I mean, the fox grape is actually a native, it's just everywhere, but like a knotweed kind of thing would be a crisis for you out there because it would just be really ugly. Like, there's no good that comes from knotweed. So how to grade that and do that without making this a different kind of problem out on the street. Like, I don't mind the fox grape climbing over the wall, but you don't want knotweed. So that's my thought
Perhaps
on that.
Jamie can work on some language in that regard, because he's so good at it. And
yeah.
I did want to mention on the planting notes, I forgot to mention this, on number 14, there's the maples are 6 to 8 feet. There's a note, street trees should be pruned to maintain a minimal branch height of 8 feet within 2 years of installation of the tree. I would change that to 5 years, because you don't want to start limbing up the trees before they've even reached anywhere near their maturity. So I would just, it would
But actually,
make
what
more
is a
sense.
street tree? Because now they're not street trees, now they're inside the stone wall. So maybe they're not even a street tree, they're a driveway tree. Like, what are the rules on a driveway tree? Is that a street tree?
We can call them something else if necessary.
Right. I have a couple of other questions, too.
Go ahead.
I appreciate that on your plans, your garages aren't, or the backs of your houses aren't facing Saugatucket Road. And I hope that when you do actually do your site layouts, you'll consider that view shed into your property, and especially with the nursery across the street, which is such a lovely, lovely building. And maybe keep your design consistent with the rural agricultural nature of that beautiful roadway. That would be something pretty awesome. But I think in your first opening thing, you had stated these houses will be about 1,500 square feet.
Correct.
But on the plans, you have them with a 1,200 square foot foundation plus garage. So are they just a 1.5 story or a half story on the second floor? Because you've got on this plan, the structures look like they're 30 by 40, and it's 2-story buildings.
So the 1,560 square feet is the footprint. So
Okay,
that's
the
not the
footprint.
gross square footage.
That's the footprint, that's not the size of this, like you had said you were building 1,500 square foot houses, which are like cute little cottages.
It's a footprint.
Madam
So-
Chair, just if I may, there's no regulatory requirement associated with the size of a home on a single-family
understand.
development proposed for a subdivision.
We don't control
So planning board would not have the ability, from a regulatory standpoint, to restrict the size of a home here. I think what you're seeing on the plans is potentially representative of what could be built here, but is not necessarily intended to represent what will be built here. During the permitting process, they need to show feasibility for building purposes, and that's what they have done. So, the engineer can correct me or add, but this is representative of developability associated with the 5 proposed house lots. It doesn't necessarily represent what will be built here. So whether they're showing a 30 by 40 square box with a 1-car garage, the approval of this plan, if that's what you do as a planning board, will not restrict them from doing 3-car garages, 4-car garages,
Okay,
or
ideas,
3,000 square foot footprints.
Okay, so I have a couple more questions, and I'll be totally done. So on your planting plan, your shrubbery looks like you're doing this sort of alternating thing between hydrangea and clethra along the inside. Is that how I'm understanding your landscape plan? I don't really, it's sort of tight, it's right here. Oh, actually, in the landscape plan. I colored it in. Right here.
Yeah, I would interpret it the same way. I don't claim to be a landscape architect, but
Yeah.
I would interpret it the same way.
Okay. Do you have a landscape architect that designed these, or was it an in-house? Okay.
Yes, we worked with Diane Soul and
Okay.
Associates.
Okay. And then my last question is that it looks like it's a private roadway that spans across 3 separate house lots. So does that mean that an individual homeowner will own a portion of that? It's not an easement. It's the driveway is being divided up among all of the homeowners?
Yeah,
The
but
driveway
there will-
and the utilities? So it's not an easement for the driveway, it's actually it's a homeowner's property.
They will own the property, but there will be access easements granted to the other property owners so they can pass and repass across the other person's property.
Okay.
So we will develop all those, and those will be all, there will be an HOA developed that'll manage roadway maintenance, trash, stormwater management, O&M, that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. Do access easements need to be straightened out now before we grant approval for this? Since there don't seem to be any access easements indicated on any plans?
Can you clarify that, Susan, with regards to
The driveway seems to span individual properties without an access easement being indicated for different homeowners like those are actually property, those are pieces of property and the people's frontage. And does there not need to be something indicated that there's an easement for all of that property that is privately owned?
There is going to need to be an easement. That the draft of the easement can come prior to the final plan submission, and our office will approve that.
A couple of other things. Most experienced landscape architects are also certified invasive plant managers. They have that certification. It would help you if you utilize the experience of your landscape architect to help with that, with the wall and the grading and all of that. And do you have plans to delineate the wetland buffer areas?
With like a marker?
Right.
We currently don't have anything proposed to delineate that. It's pretty obvious in the field where that buffer is located. It's cleared right up to it.
That's something that DPS will often ask for. Mark, have you folks thought about, and I know there are different types of markers. Is that something that you folks have discussed?
No, we haven't. But I'd like to point out that this still has to go back to DEM for approval, correct? I mean, this is in the process, so
Yeah,
you're still...
it's under review right now.
Under review, correct.
So my question was, do you feel that this should be delineated as we generally do in other projects?
I thought the buffer was shown on the plans. I don't have a...
Madam Chair, are you referencing a permanent buffer in the
A
field?
marker.
Permanent marker in the field? The board has done that in the past, but more recently, that project that was done on was on very small parcels on a comprehensive permit where there was concern about the property owners overextending their small yards to make them a bigger yard, which was the reasoning why we had the signage put in place. In this instance, when you look on the site plan, I believe the buffers are outlined in green. They are kind of tucked away in the back corner behind the drainage and all of that. I think the likelihood of intrusion back there is less. Again, it's very difficult to make that statement generally on every application, But looking at the property and the way it's configured and laid out, to me, it seems like that portion of the property is a little less available for intrusion.
I thought I'd mention it to the board and to Public Services, because that's something that's educational and environmentally sensitive areas and so on. All right, if there's anything else, if there's nothing else from anybody, Jamie, do you have some language for us?
I have three, I just want to clarify, I have 3 items based on the discussion
This is your map, sorry.
that came forward with the planning board. Item number 1 was clarifying that any disturbance of the stone wall during construction would require repair and replacement in kind. Item number 2 was relocating the proposed street trees and to a location internal to the site to avoid conflicts with utilities. Said trees shall be of the maple variety, red or sugar, so Green Mountain type or Sunset Crimson red maples. Item number 3 was providing some permanent wetlands buffer markers via permanent posts and marker tags. And then staff had already reviewed the additional items 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Just clarifying that permits are for the PAP or curb cut are associated with the town, not the state.
So I had on my list that the applicant would provide a narrative with regard to the entrance of the site. That the stone walls, the grading adjacent to the stone walls should be considerate of the invasives and should seek either advice or seek assistance from the landscape architect.
We talked about the width of the driveway too, is that a thing?
Yes.
We had also talked a little bit about the width of the driveway and whether that could be considered to be reduced if Union Fire was agreeable.
And I didn't articulate it terribly well with regard to the grading and the maintenance or the invasives, the appropriate care to maintain the integrity of the stone wall.
And I think, Madam Chair, my intent was under item number 1 that any work associated with grading and or landscaping that damaged the existing wall, the applicant was required to repair in kind. Everything north of the stone walls in the town right of way. So again, they'll be working with the Department of Public Service on a PAP for any work within that. Future maintenance of that right of way is the responsibility of the town, not the landowners, because it's not their land, it's within the town right of way. So you can do it during construction, which was my intent with item number 1. But after that, again, the developers in development should be responsible for maintaining their sight lines, but again, it's within the town right of way.
I was thinking just a little more language that mentions utilization of assistance It's from the landscape architect on the project.
Give me a moment.
Right, and the 5-year on the number 14 on the planting plan, change it from 2 years to 5 years.
5-year warranty on plant material?
No, it wasn't the warranty, it was the pruning, the language in the, which I don't want to unfold the whole thing again, but it said within 2 years, you need to prune it to 8 feet and.
I think the intent was when they were within the town right-of-way, that they be limbed up to a minimum of 8 feet.
That's true. Now they're not
that we're
within the
moving
town
them
right-of-way,
internal, I think that issue is moot.
Hopefully, they'll just listen to their landscape architect and
So-
ensure that they're.
I had 3 items, but with further discussion, item number 4, for discussion purposes, would be the applicant's ability or requirement to reduce the driveway width to 18 feet with 2-foot load-bearing shoulders upon approval and consultation with the town's fire marshal. And item number 5, to the proposed conditions 1 through 13, would be that the landscape architect provide a narrative for proposed curb cut and associated grading and landscaping.
That's good. I think that's everything.
So with the addition of 5, there would be 18 conditions.
Okay. Before we get to that, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? No one here. Would someone like to close the public hearing?
I'll make a motion. I'll make that motion.
Susan, motion to close the public hearing. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Caper, second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. And then we have an amended motion that begins on page, well, we have, right, but what Jamie's version doesn't.
Madam Chair, you have a 6-page project review memo dated, when I revised it today, it redated it October 16th, but you have a project review memo that contained an original 5 conditions. I'll go back there. Let's go back to that. You had a draft motion on page
Okay, yes,
5 of 6.
5, that's what I was
Yeah,
getting
on
to.
page
It's-
5 of 6 was the draft motion for consideration. Findings of fact A through F, finding of facts
right.
regarding waivers G through H, conditions of approval, which were originally 1 through 5. Staff amended that to be 1 through 13, which was distributed tonight, and during discussions, there's a recommendation to add an additional 5. So your conditions of approval would be 1 through 18. I can run through those quickly in a summary form.
Yes, and what I was actually trying to say is that the actual beginning of the motion starts on page 5.
Correct.
And then your page starts thereafter.
Yes. So I'm just going to summarize the conditions
Certainly.
of approval that are contained in the memo on page 6. Item number 1 is limited to 5 lots. Item number 2, served by public water and on-site wastewater treatment. Item number 3 deals with access as a shared driveway. No future curb cuts. Requires easement language to be provided prior to final plan approval. Item number 4 incorporates all TRC conditions. Item number 5 was survey monumentation associated with the development and final administrative officer approval. Item number 6 is all required town approvals and state approvals prior to final approval. Item number 7 is solidifying water service associated with the location and no cross easements. Item number 8 is the proposed 2-inch water main should be reviewed and approved by Veolia Water. We realize we do have correspondence from them. Item number 9, proposed stormwater management area, parcels 2 and 3 shall be included within the easement, so there's a revision there. Item number 10 is the proposed 12-inch driveway culvert may need to be modified to accommodate a 25-year storm. Item 11, facilities maintenance agreement needs to be finalized. Item 12 is associated with soil and erosion control permitting. Item 11 is the physical alteration permit that's required from the town of South Kingstown. Item number 14 is associated with any repair and disturbance to the stone wall in kind associated with the landscaping and storm drainage improvements. That's 14. Item 15 would be moving the street trees internal to the site and the call out to be maple variety. Item 16 would be to install permanent wetlands markers and posts. Item 17 would be reduced width to 18 feet with 2-foot load-bearing shoulders. Item 18 would be that the landscape architect provide a narrative for proposed curb cut and maintenance of associated grading and landscaping. Again, that's a summary of
Yes, thank you,
complete
Jamie.
language.
Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll try to make that motion. The South Kingstown Planning Board hereby grants combined conceptual master and preliminary plan approval to Saugatucket Farms, a 5-lot major flexible frontage subdivision for single-family development located at 216 Saugatucket Road, Denali Corporation, applicant owner. This approval is based on the plan titled Saugatucket Farms 5-lot major subdivision, 216 Saugatucket Road, AP 52, lot 8 inches, sheets 1 through 9, dated June 2025, prepared by Joe Casali Engineering, Inc., 300 Post Road, Warwick, Rhode Island, 02888. This approval is based on the following findings of fact and conditions of approval. Findings of fact A through F. Findings of fact in regard to waivers G and H. Conditions of approval 1 through 5. Conditions of approval 6 through 13, added October 16th, 2025, from the town engineer, and then 5 additional findings, conditions of approval. I will just summarize those. Item number 14, with regards to reducing the driveway width to 18 feet with the approval of the fire department. Item number 15, landscape architect to provide narrative of proposed design and associate grading. Item number 16, regarding repair of the existing stone wall. Item number 17, with regards to moving the street trees internally to the site. And item number 18, with regards to permanent wetland markers.
Well done. Second? Second from Joe. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. 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 Motion carries. Thank you. Good luck. Next agenda item is land use, Old Tower Hill Road, form-based code. Jamie?
Madam Chair, just a brief update on the form-based code. We are in the process of reviewing revisions as an outcome of our last workshop with Pam and Jason King. They have downloaded a revision to our FTP site for the town. Our intent is to take the summary discussions of the planning board, take some potential revisions, work off of the draft provided and reviewed by the planning board, create a summary letter that would go to the council with the planning board making recommendations to that original document, with the understanding that some of those recommendations have been incorporated, and we will reference where they have been incorporated, but there may be some items that are outstanding to be incorporated that need further action and discussion by the council. So we're hoping to have that, depending on workload, for your next meeting in November. Again, we need to manage workload with our staff. We will be having some changes to that, so if you bear with us, we would appreciate that. But our intent is to try and wrap this up for you in November, with the understanding that we only have one meeting in December because of the holiday, and that's typically what you do in December. I wouldn't want to call you out 2 days before the Christmas season and holiday and other events going on in December and in early January. So.
Do we have any reports from planning board liaison activities? No. Update from staff, general, and then I also wanted to remind everyone that the planning board training is coming up November 15th. Hopefully everybody signed up for that. And then, Jamie, I wonder if you can just address when we can be thinking about continuing sort of our conversation with regard to, Joe mentioned a few months ago, capacity, looking at things in a comprehensive manner, as the planning board is the steward and keeper of the comprehensive community plan. The council has been talking about water capacity and infrastructure, non-renewable resources, that sort of thing. Having a conversation about that, build out, big picture stuff, something that we should discuss in the
and
future.
It's not the directors or the planning department staff who's lost sight of this information that the planning board is inquiring about. It's just managing workload and trying to finish
understood.
product that's in the queue before we take on something additional. I have mentioned it to Mr. Bourbonnais, who's the director of the Department of Public Service, as it relates to sewer water capacity. I know we have a number of large projects that have been approved and potentially in the queue, so that is becoming more important. We do have, again, staffing challenges within both DPS and planning, and can only manage a certain amount of workload. So if you, again, bear with us, please be patient.
Yep,
It's not that we're losing sight of it, but we have priorities that are taking precedence over this at the time being. Just two other important things, Marie, I think to mention is there is a town council meeting next Thursday night. The subject matter of that council meeting is having town's legal counsel review and bring the council up to date on recent legislative changes that affect land use and planning endeavors within the town of South Kingstown, and have a discussion on that. Amy Goins will be doing that presentation and working with the council on implications of the changes, what potentially they could do moving forward, how they could have discussions with state legislature and representatives on moving forward. And, in some aspects, you get around to just changing and they change again. So, as we have moratoriums on development, maybe there could be a moratorium on changes in legislation for land use boards and commissions so that the 39 municipalities in Rhode Island can catch up, take a breather, and then understand what the implications actually are as we go through the permitting process.
And you know, Jamie, that's actually very challenging to try to explain what the consequences, whether they're unintended or not, are to people who aren't necessarily used to planning speak in a way that
You know, and if
can
you look,
demonstrate
if you look
what-
at, you know, we have 39
how it makes-
municipalities in Rhode Island, if you just round that off to 40, and if a typical zoning code is 200 pages, you have 40 times 200 pages, or, you know, a significant, over 2,000 pages of local regulations that changes every 12 months. And in some instances, it changes every 6 months because the start and stop dates for changes to the legislation are going on. So you're managing changes. The developer community has to understand the changes, articulate the changes, and understand the changes in the permitting queue. Never mind switching over to electronic permitting process that was mandated by the state legislature. So it's a learning curve for everyone. And we're still trying to catch up, and that's part of the discussion with Amy Goins on next Thursday. The important thing, and we have had support from the town council financially within the department to bring on a consultant to look at significant modernization of our zoning code. I won't say a rewrite or update. It's not really changing zoning classifications and setbacks. It's just modernizing the way our code reads to see if we can simplify, remove redundancies, remove cross-references, and get a more workable baseline set of regulations moving forward. But all of that takes time and effort. And again, to you know, kudos to Jay and Brian managing the workload that we've been under permitting-wise. Again, we took up time tonight in a work session to try and move some things out of the permitting queue. Fortunately, we were able to move 2 of those projects along, but the planning board doesn't see these again. It doesn't mean they go away. There's a significant workload associated with taking these from preliminary plan approval to final plan approval. So your workload is lessened, but our workload continues. So even if you didn't see new permits in the next 2 to 4 months, we're still processing applications that you may, in some aspects, haven't seen for 12 months that are still in the queue going back and forth with final plan approval and review. So
I think that's also important to articulate to the town council.
yeah, once it's
The amount of
Yeah.
staff time is huge, let alone management of the boards and
Yeah.
commissions.
I want to say Jay probably spent 80 to 90% of his time on permitting load and processing that. And as the workload gets more substantial, it's a load on Brian to pick up that. And then it becomes a further load administratively on the AO processing everything Brian and Jay are handling to get it positioned so that someone can actually put a shovel in the ground.
Are we expecting our efforts at electronic permitting to have the same issues as DEM apparently is, with everything slowing down, or is ours more simple and therefore?
I mean, we were under a mandate, well, all 39 municipalities were under a mandate to go electronic on
Right.
October 1st. Not every community has, and you know, we were trying to hit that date. I'm not completely upset that we didn't make October 1st, because what we're finding out is that some communities who started on October 1st are already asking the state to make some small revisions to the permitting process, because as they find out that this is being worked on by applicants, I don't think we have a DEM issue, where in essence like the system crashes and there's a significant 6-month backlog. It's just going to be a learning curve both for staff as well as the applicants to process this.
Time to work out the bugs, right? I mean, that should be built
Yeah.
into the...
So again, we're working with Lori Fox and Jay, Brian, as well as Lynn. We've been trying to run existing applications kind of experimentally through the process to see where the kinks are, where the flaws are, but we can do our best. We're not going to eliminate all of them, so when it hits the street, we potentially anticipate some issues. But the issues don't give us any time, additional time. The timeframes still remain the same. So if there's a bug mid-application, the clock's still running. So again, patience from the planning board, patience from the developers who are submitting applications, and patience from our elected officials on bearing through the process that has been mandated from the state. The third thing I wanted to mention is, twofold. Maria mentioned upcoming events, one being land use training. The second is October 25th, which is Connecticut Main Street, has a session in Cranston. I'm going from memory here. Unfortunately, it is a Saturday. Fortunately or unfortunately, there are only 52 of them in a year, but it is a Saturday. There is a small fee associated with it of $25. But if anyone is interested in attending the meeting, it's Grow Smart Rhode Island who's having a discussion on the establishment of a Main Street coordination position within 39 communities of Rhode Island for towns and municipalities who want to participate. We've long had this in my home state of Connecticut. It's a good program. It's newer to Rhode Island, so if anyone's interested in it, you can reach out to me and we'll make sure we get you registered, and the department will take care of that small registration fee. We may ask you, because the way it's electronically registered, to have you registered, and we can reimburse you. And again, we're moving forward on legislative initiatives and still picking away on our form-based code, as well as affordable housing, economic development, and potential discussions of merger between the Sustainability Commission and the Conservation Commission.
Very good.
Can I ask you about the meeting between Sorry. Can I ask about the meeting with the town council and the land use issues, and how that involves the planning board?
So we've been asked to invite leadership of the planning board. I believe the chair and vice chair have been invited. We're extending that invitation to all land use boards and commissions. It's primarily an update by legal counsel with the town council. I am not 100% clear on the participation level of other land use boards and commissions, but you're more than welcome to attend. Again, I am not clear on the level of participation that's and expectations of participation. So.
Jamie, it would be great for a conversation to be had with Amy, who obviously has been working on this, so that she can explain some of the difficulties which actually go back beyond or prior to this previous legislative session, and how it impacts everyone.
Again, Amy is aware of that. Amy and I have had a host of conversations associated with this. I'm working with her on her presentation and slide deck. And again, we'll continue to have that conversation. This is potentially not just one meeting. This could be one in a series of meetings. I don't think you can resolve significant land use matters in a 2-hour meeting or conversation.
It's also hard if it's just legalese and not,
yes,
And
again, the council, as well as the town manager's office, has been very supportive of the planning department and the planning board. So I expect that to continue.
Good. All right, motion to adjourn? Motion from Liz, second. Joe? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thanks, everyone.